we were just coming down the road and saw this boy sitting there and sitting in this tire, and we just pulled over and started talking to him, and he was, just very sheepish and quiet. We had the village chief was with us, and we said, hey, what's the story with this boy? And the chief said his dad died a few years ago. His mom left him here so that she could go to the bigger city to work. And so she basically just abandoned him. He kind of lives with, some different families and, kind of goes from hut to hut. And that was his life. And the chief said when his mom left him here, she had never even given him a name. A year later, to see that smile on his face and know that he had a bed to sleep in and had friends and had, meals to eat and school to go to, was truly life-changing.
Hello and welcome to the Wild Shutter Podcast. I'm Matthew Gehly. Thank you so much for taking the time to click and listen to us today. I'm very thankful to have a wonderful guest with us. Matt Addington is here with us, coming to us from Minnesota. It's starting to, I'm sure the winter is starting to kind of melt away a little bit up there as it is here in Pennsylvania. It's just a little bit of green starting to show up, and probably by the time people are hearing this podcast, it's going to be more into the springtime. But Matt has taken the time out to speak with me here today. I'm very thankful for that. I want to tell you a little bit about Matt's work before we get started. And whenever I look at Matt's work online and I see his portfolio, whether that's on Instagram or his websites, I always think about the word authentic. And I think that kind of, I'm going to use the word resonates throughout his work. So growing up in Minnesota, Matt has lived the life of adventure. From paddling rivers and lakes to hiking mountains, his passion for the outdoors is evident in his work, whether it's a brilliant wildlife shot or a lifestyle image produced for his long list of adventure clients. So I think that as we talk to Matt today, welcome, Matt, by the way. I don't think I said that.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be in the stable of guests that you've had, Matthew, and you do such a great job, so I couldn't be more excited to be on with you.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. So, reading through your bio and looking at your website, I love how it was written, and it talks so much about like the adventures that you've had throughout your life. And I just was wondering about how much you feel actually being on the ground, going through the woods, going through the mountains, going through the rivers, how much does that influence the way that you create an image or video or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean, I've been blessed to be able to go to some great places and great lengths and exotic places, but at the same time can be in my backyard and feel inspired with stuff. I remember when I was a little kid sitting in deer stands and probably to the chagrin of my dad or whoever was with me, not paying attention to the actual hunting part that I should have been, but looking at textures and shapes and trees and branches and colors and just really being enamored with creation. And I think ultimately, like over the course of time, that has kind of found its way into my work. It's become, I think, infused. Being an art major, having gone through the formal training of it, you learn to use those tools and observations then, I think, to your advantage. And for whatever it's worth, I think I've been semi-successful being able to use those tools, and I think they are just observations of the cool places I've been able to go.
I definitely feel like whenever I see some of your work for your commercial clients, hunting and fishing and those adventure clients, like I feel like I'm on the adventure with them through your images. So you're telling that story, and that's what the client needs to make the product sell or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. You use that word authentic, and that's kind of the goal. And I guess you don't even go into those things like so focused on being hung up on I have to do. Like I'm just kind of living it, and I happen to have this tool with me that can hopefully translate that experience a little bit to the people that ultimately look at whether it be a photo or a video piece afterwards. I hope that they're able to see, how much fun I was having and how much adventure it was, and just, feel some of those things, because that's all we have is, the camera's a tool that is in our hands along the way. And the most successful shoots and the ones that I've enjoyed the most are the ones that I think in the end, someone who wasn't there can say they feel like they were there. And I think that's kind of the ultimate compliment that you can receive for using that tool, kind of doing what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you were an art major. And I know just from digging into your background a little bit that you also have a master's degree. Maybe talk a little bit about your education
Yeah, I went to Augustana College, now Augustana University in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I always like to say I was pre-med, which is pretty impressive for people, but that only lasted about 3 days. And then I switched to art. So probably the most extreme 180 degree turn anybody's ever made. But I'm
sure your family thought, well, this will go well.
Yeah, God, he was going to be a doctor, and now, how do you make money being an art major? But yeah, so that was a great experience. I've often said too, like Augustana for me was not about the art training I got. It was about the just learning to have relationships with people training. That's what the special place was with a school like that for me. And then I taught for 20 years. I was an art teacher at all levels, high school, middle school, elementary school, online, kind of usually a little bit of everything at one time. I was a head basketball coach kind of through that time too. So got my master's along the way, in the education field, and my family's in education, and the photography thing sort of kept taking over my world more and more. And, like you and I talked off air, I have a tremendous respect for educators still to this day, and know that what they are doing today, I don't know that I could still be doing. So I'm grateful for what I do, but I also look back at those chapters of my life, and I'm really grateful that I was able to, have relationships in education and through the schooling and stuff that I did.
Yeah. So our path is relatively similar. I had a bachelor's degree in communication, radio, TV, and did that for a little bit. Went back to school to teach, and then I got a master's degree in education-related field. Thinking about that, though, the way that you see, and you own your own company now, and you hire people, I'm sure, and how important is a college degree for someone looking to get into a creative field like photography?
It's a good question. I get asked a lot by young people and older people alike. I think now more than ever, it's not essential. That's for sure. I mean, there is, as far as the learning, the skills of the trade of photography, of video production, of filmmaking, all those things. I mean, we all spend a lot of time on YouTube and can learn a tremendous amount there. The thing that I would say, and I alluded to it earlier, like the value for me in my higher education, both with my bachelor's and my master's, was the ability to relate with people, to go to a place on my own, independently, away from family and friends, and that which was comfortable, and learn how to make it on your own in forging new relationships and dealing with people and dealing with challenges and all those things. There's probably not a lot technically that I do now, as a professional in the field, that I learned from, either my undergrad or my master's degree. And I, all due respect to all those teachers that I had, those professors, those advisors, but those were bigger life skills that I took with me that I think were more valuable. So it's a tough question to answer, because I would not trade 1 minute of that whole experience for where it's gotten me to now, socially. And like I said, in what we do, the ability to relate with people and to understand people and communicate with people that's at least half of what I do, is that, those skills right there. And then to be able to visually communicate with people and understand their stories and what they're looking for and how they look at things. You pair that with a little bit of technical knowledge, which, I've acquired along the way, and that's been kind of the magic formula. So I know that doesn't answer a yes or no to do you need it, but that's kind of the way it worked out for me.
I hear more and more people talking about, especially in a creative field, but sometimes not even in a creative field, just that if you can show the initiative, if you can show the drive and the willingness to learn on the job, because I'm sure everyone has had that's gone to college. You've had an internship or something, and you're like, "Whoa, you learn everything on the internship almost."
Right.
So, if you're the kind of person that's able to adapt and learn on the fly, that's probably almost more important than a 4-year degree to a certain extent.
I think you're totally right. And I think we talked about our kids and their generation. My fear is that these kids, from a social standpoint, have lived in a completely different space than what we did as we were maturing. And, you can scroll through Instagram for hours and look at photographers and creators that are way more talented than what I am. But I fear for them in that their whole world has been, in that phone or on that screen. And even as some of those folks that I've hired and had along with me, like that's one thing that I assess right away is like, how is this young person able to work with this client in the field? They might be awesome with the camera, amazing with the camera, but are they able to function and communicate and be social and all of those things? That's equally as important. And I really, I would really push that with young people that though you may be really talented, you may have a lot of followers on Instagram, all those things, make sure that you're doing what you can to relate face to face in person with people. Cause that's, the humankind that's never going to go away from us.
No, absolutely.
I hope.
So, yeah, it's true. So we're kind of dancing around it a little bit. Can you tell me about your company and what you guys do and maybe your specific role within that company?
Yeah, I was sort of the one-man band for a number of years while I was teaching, building clients, building relationships. I shot a lot of weddings, over the course of the years and senior photos and all those things just to kind of hone my skills and build a network.
You probably loved doing weddings too, didn't you? You probably loved it.
Yeah, edit that out so that I don't get any calls. No, I was kidding about that. But again, a great chapter in my life because so many great relationships, But the one-man band thing, I found that I was building, I started working with these clients that were just amazing clients that I had dreamed of working with, or gosh, if I could ever shoot photos for them, or, and all of a sudden I was, and then realizing like there was always more things that, people were asking for. Can you do websites? Can you do graphic design? Can you do social media? Can you do brand strategy? Can you do SEO? All of these things, besides just production. And I've got two partners that we formed Resonate here about 4 years ago. And we each kind of have our own silos. We have our own individual companies still that exist. Matt Addington and Joel Nelson and Jesse Dolan all have their own, but we've kind of brought together the web and SEO and the social media and writing and brand strategy that Joel brought in. And we kind of brought it together to be able to say to clients on all fronts, like, yes, the answer is always yes. We can figure out a way. And so it's been great to have, kind of build out a team, around myself or together. And not only just even within the production part of things to have some other shooters that come along with me or editors or people that I can lean on, lean on their skills and ultimately produce even a better product. So there's still a little element of kind of one-man band or Matt doing his production or having a team that's doing production that's still on the outside of Resonate, but then being able to use Resonate, to have that all-encompassing, digital marketing agency, if you will, that can offer so much more. So it's been a really nice balance for me.
Well, that's awesome. Do you primarily, are you a shooter now, or do you still edit?
I do. Editing has always been this love-hate thing where I really, really love it once I get in the zone. and then it's like, don't interrupt me. I'm going to be here for a couple days. But I still, when it comes down to it, I still love shooting, and I love shooting, and I love, just looking at what you got afterwards and knowing that you have told a story on that memory card. And so I'm leaning a little bit on editors on our team, but I still do a fair amount of it myself. And just because I like having, as creators, as artists, there's part of you that's still, at least for me, it's hard to relegate that and trust other people. So I'm very particular about the people I have around me, especially when it comes to the edit, when like the story needs to be exactly what I have in mind. And been fortunate that I've got a few around me right now.
That's awesome. Do you like Premiere, or are you using something else?
I'm a Premiere guy through and through. When I first started teaching in the mid to late 90s, Premiere was like, I went to our principal and said, hey, there's this thing called digital video that's coming and we need to get on. And so I started at Premiere 1.0 and a big old Dell machine with this massive monitor. And so been with Premiere since the inception. And same thing even on the photo side. Like I like to kind of brag that I was there at Photoshop 1.0 and I was on the beta testing team for Lightroom. So even before that was released, I was working with some folks at Adobe to kind of help craft that product. So definitely been in the mix for a long time.
Yeah, I've been using Premiere for a really long time, but I do have to admit I started with Avid.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Premiere bought out, or Adobe bought out Avid. If I remember right. I could be wrong, but yeah, Avid, I don't think it's really around anymore. So
yeah. There were a couple times, depending on the jobs when I was teaching, that I taught Final Cut for a while and scratched the surface a little bit with DaVinci recently, but it's kind of one of those where so many people brag about it and all the great things, and I'm like, I don't have the time to try to learn it, especially when it's been Premiere for 25 years.
Yeah, you know the keyboard shortcuts. Once you have a platform, that's what I'm sticking to. I'm not interested in learning anything else. I'm an old dog at this point.
Exactly. I don't need any new tricks right now.
That's right. Well, so talking about having a vision and an editor, I saw a clip that you put on social media for the Some Guy film that you guys worked on. And I was blown away. There was like a lot of glitches. It was almost like you were trying to get into the character's head. And I thought it was just so cool. And before we go too much further, are you able to talk about that project and tell us a little bit about where that's headed and where we're going to be able to see it?
For sure. It's as far as I'm concerned right now, it's sitting there waiting for the Onyx guys to push play on it. Have had great partners, in Onyx being one of them, throughout the years. And we had this vision of this movie, the film about this guy, and his name is Guy, not to, give the whole thing away, but he's just one of the more interesting characters you would ever meet in your life. And I had this vision of kind of this bipolar dual personality that Guy has, and part of it was this predator that you saw in that glitchy piece, and the other part is this Gandalf-looking character, and so I would say we can probably be, by the time this podcast airs, we should be, I would think, published or rolling on Onyx's channels and our channels. So just keep an eye out for that. But that particular edit, one of my guys named Phil Scharf lives down in Missouri, that I've kind of brought on as an editor, totally took my vision and just kind of helped craft that and just did an amazing job. So I really leaned hard on Phil with that project. Once I saw that he got what I was talking about, which was really key. And he did, a lot of that kind of that glitchy dark edit. He did the longer version of it. I kind of plucked different parts from it to shorten it down into some reels and some shorts. But that captured the character that Guy Cunningham is once you step into the turkey woods, for sure. So I'm really anxious for people to see that film. Like I said, it'll be out here in the next week or so.
Yeah, it looks really neat. So it's It's a documentary essentially then about him?
It is. It's not what I thought when I started. Like when I started out, I wasn't quite sure where to go with it, and it became this kind of ping-ponging back and forth between a hunt and then this guy telling stories about his past and the things that inspire him, and it sort of ping-pongs back and forth. So it documents a hunt, but it also documents a little bit about his life and who he is as a character. So without giving it all away, there's not some crazy ending to it, but that's kind of the format that the film ended up taking, and which was really not what I envisioned at the start. And that's kind of what I love about the filmmaking thing is there are some of these documentary style things that are very, linear, where it's got a start and it's got a middle and it's got a conclusion and you've got a hero and this character. And this was one that was really unique, and I'm really excited about the way it turned out. It certainly was not what I intended. In fact, to the point where we are working on a sort of a director's cut where I can explain some of these things, that how it did take some turns that I didn't expect, and how how the edit came together. So that'll be another little aside that we'll do afterwards.
That's really intriguing. It's amazing that you're able to have that kind of storytelling ability while working with Onyx. Was this a project that they brought to you, or did you come across this character? How did that work?
Yeah, I came across this character. So Joel Nelson, one of my partners in Resonate, Guy was kind of instrumental in Joel's learning how to turkey hunt as a young boy. And so Joel was, kind of like, hey, someday we should do a film about Guy. And Ben Bredigan, who works at Onyx, had hunted once with Guy as well. So, when we'd been together, we always kind of joked about, someday we should do a movie about Guy Cunningham. It was always sort of a laugh about it, joke about it. And, Guy thought it was hilarious that we would ever, and that's kind of where it started. And then we finally just sat down and said, let's do it. Let's see where this goes. And Onyx, many thanks to Ben, believing in the story and knowing the character, said, let's go with it. So it would have been maybe a hard one to pitch to somebody that didn't know Guy a little bit, but I feel like when you see him and you hear his laugh and you see the character, everybody that I've shown parts of this to that don't know Guy they're like, is this guy for real? He is. There's something about him. So that's part of the intrigue of the story.
That's great. I love the name. It's perfect. And not to get political here, but his look. So we travel relatively far to go to church every week, and this weekend where I live, we were actually in the path of totality for the eclipse. And so this weekend, coming home on Sunday, we're on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and then another busy highway, and it was just crowded, so many cars. And I came up, and I don't know what kind of car this was. It was this little tiny neon car. And there's this bumper sticker or window sticker, and I'll tell you what it said in a minute. As I'm passing, I see this guy in full camo, big burly beard, kind of looks like your guy,
Yeah.
And he's huddled in this thing, and his sticker on the back said, "Thanks, Biden, I used to drive a truck." But it was just great because, he looked like a guy that used to drive a truck, and he's in the worst car I've ever seen.
Walked right out of the woods into his,
with this neon blue, terrible, I don't know, it was like a wind-up car. It was awful.
Yeah.
So,
well, my guy would have had a bumper sticker that said something similar, and it probably would have had some expletives on it too, so...
Yeah, I don't care what political affiliation you are. That's funny.
That's good. That's
good stuff.
This episode of the Wild Shutter Podcast is brought to you by Cotton Carrier. The Cotton Carrier G3 harness system is my favorite way to carry my camera when I'm out in the field. The ergonomic design of the G3 harness system distributes the weight of your camera, helping to lessen the fatigue of a long shooting day. The G3 keeps you hands-free, your equipment safe, and your body mobile and ready to shoot. Use the link in the description below and use the coupon code WILDShutter to get 10% off your purchase at cottoncarrier.com. Now, let's get back to the podcast.
There aren't too many places that you haven't been where you've been photographing. Where is a place that you would go back to a million times over?
Man, people ask me that often, and I feel like I give it probably a different answer every time. But Africa has captured me in a lot of different ways, and I think the first time that I went there, I came home, and that was now 9 years ago. I think was my first trip, and I just feel like even at this point in my life, that was a pretty pivotal moment. I think there's a little something Africa in each of us, if you will, that maybe we don't all know, and maybe some of us will never discover. But for a lot of reasons, Africa would be probably the place, and obviously that's a big place. It's I've been to South Africa, Namibia, Tanzania, Kenya. There's been a lot of places I've been, but just a lot of common threads. One with the culture, the people, the amazing joy that is there, that in a real humbling kind of way that we don't get to experience here. But then, on the other side of things, like the wildlife is incredible. It's out of a storybook. It's things that we grew up, being read to at night, showed in pictures, and all of a sudden to be there in the middle of that with your camera capturing that. I did 4 trips where I wanted a photo of a male lion looking where I knew that animal was looking at me, and it took 4 trips, but finally got that image, and it was, it took your breath away as someone who, you think about all those things. And so Africa would be the place. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but for a lot of different reasons.
Well, you took your family there. You have 3 children, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you took your family there relatively recently, right?
It was this fall. Yep, in November.
Okay, and was that connected to a job, or was that strictly for your family to experience it?
Yeah, we've been involved with a ministry in Kenya called Simba Educational Ministries, which was actually the vehicle that kind of got me there on my first trip. Which is a long story on how that all happened. But we've become involved with Simba over the past 9 years. Both my wife and I have served on their board of directors, and it's a ministry that has gone into these places where kids and families are in need, and that's, like I said earlier, that's so much of Africa. We live our lives here in the U.S. Just desperately seeking the next thing and to acquire stuff. And we're trying to find joy in all those things, and trying to just, get one step ahead and keep up with the Joneses, if you will. And all of these places in Africa, these folks literally have nothing tangible. I mean, just nothing. And they have the joy that we are so desperately seeking every single day. And to come, to experience that and to be in the middle of that, you feel like, I'm going on a mission trip. I'm going to Africa and going to make a difference. And there is not 1 ounce of me that made one bit of difference in comparison to how it impacted me coming back. So, over the past few years, my wife Leah's been there a couple times. I'd been there, 4, 5, 6 times. And we, through this ministry, had kind of adopted or sponsored 2 kids that we've kind of watched them grow up. We've had the ability to go there and to meet their families and to see them every year a couple times. No discount to a Compassion or World Vision or some of these where you send in your check and you get a letter once in a while. But we had the tangible relationship with them. And so all along we just said we felt it was so important to have our kids there to meet Ignatius and Elika and all the other kids that, you've heard mom and dad talk about all these years. And so the opportunity was there, and so the 5 of us got to go for a couple weeks in November, and it was awesome. It's exhausting. It's not a vacation by any means, but we really trust that like what God did in the hearts of our kids will manifest itself over time. It's not something where they came home and life has changed right now, but you think about that as our kids are 12 and 15 and 17. And so you pray that over the course of time, that experience will affect them and influence them, in the future. So it was a great trip. It was really exciting. And I do a little bit of marketing stuff for the ministry. So I'm always, toting the camera around and shooting stuff and collecting video and trying to, just help tell the story of the ministry while I'm there. But it certainly was a great trip for our family.
I imagine that the ability to watch your kids being affected, to watch them experience Africa through their eyes was probably something you'll never forget.
Yeah, you come home and you tell the stories and you talk about it, and you pray for those kids, and your kids, I think they're taking that in, but to be there, like tangibly, like seeing,
smiling with the other kids, and
those little African, like our youngest son Keaton is 12, and he's got kind of a long blonde mullet, and there were 10 kids holding on to him everywhere he went, touching his hair, touching his skin. Just they're so enamored, and they're just so in love with the fact that we are there and spending time with them. And so for our kids to experience that, where being a kid in the U.S. these days is hard, and it's you're juggling relationships and social media and all the things, and to just be there like in this in the middle of like this unfiltered joy was really cool to see our kids be able to experience that with them.
You said he's got kind of a blonde mullet, and I laughed because my son has red hair, and he had a mullet for a long time, and he finally just cut it off, and we were like, "Thank you, I'm so glad you cut that thing off."
Yeah, I can't say anything because I rocked a pretty solid one my senior year in high school. Yeah. In fact, my senior pictures were such. I'm glad I didn't send it to you, but
I had hair down to here.
I kind of just bite my lip and let it go. So
yeah, I had my Seattle grunge days. So we all have to, let your hair down and let it grow.
For sure.
Yeah, good times. So you shared a picture of a little boy, actually 2 pictures. Maybe you could tell us that story of this young man.
Yeah. A great segue from just what I had talked about with the ministry. That was the first image of the boy, in the tire with the black jacket on. Like everywhere you go, there are just people like just sitting on the side of the road and just, abandoned, and just there's orphans and widowed. Like it tears your heart out. And we were just coming down the road and saw this boy sitting there sitting in this tire. And we just pulled over and started talking to him, and he was, just very sheepish and quiet, and we just kind of asked him how he was doing and smiled and, asked to pray for him and stuff. And so as we were getting ready to leave, we had the village chief was with us, and we said, hey, what's the story with this boy? And the chief said, his dad died a few years ago. His mom left him here so that she could go to the bigger city to work. And so she basically just abandoned him. He kind of lives with, some different families and, kind of goes from hut to hut. And that was his life. And one of the girls that was on our trip at that point, she was really moved by this and just said, well, what's his name? And the chief said, when his mom left him here, she had never even given him a name. And so at that point, she said, I want to do what I can to sponsor this kid and get him into the school. And that's ultimately what Simba is doing, is getting these kids that don't have opportunities and getting them into a boarding school called St. Jacob's. And so the second picture then, so she was able to, go through some of the details to sponsor him. And the chief said, you basically you can give him a name. And so she got to name him Gabriel. And gave him that opportunity to then go to school and, have a life. I mean, have a name, let alone a life. I mean, it blows my mind. But the second picture was a year later. I went back to the school and then saw Gabriel and, was able to take a photo. And I look at the two of those photos side by side and I'm like, here's a kid that was sitting in the ditch and didn't have a mom or a dad or a home or a name. And a year later to see that smile on his face and know that he had a bed to sleep in and had friends and had, meals to eat and school to go to, was truly, life changing, eternity changing for that kid, for that matter. So it was it's a great example of, the ministry that's happening there and the ability to sponsor children for, $1 a day or whatever it is. And those two photos, I feel like tell the story of the amazing things that can happen in one life, for sure.
Yeah, the demeanor change is incredible. I mean, it doesn't even look like the same kid. Just the joy that you can see on his face is, wow.
Those two photos, if you were to give me, 2 minutes to tell like how this ministry has changed lives, including my own, those two images would be the ones that I think illustrate that best.
While we're talking about it, like if someone was interested in getting involved, it's called Simba.
Yep.
How would you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think the website is simbaeducationalministries.org. It's based out of South Dakota, and it's there's a lot of information on there. So it's an amazing ministry. It's been a really cool thing to be involved in.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll kind of stay on the continent here. We were talking beforehand, and I saw this image that we're going to put on the screen. I saw it small on my screen, and then I blew it up, and I kept looking at it, trying to figure out what I was looking at. And that's what's so intriguing about it. And I thought that I knew, but I wasn't sure. And then I guess I finally figured it out. And it's one of those, I feel like sometimes you look at a painting, you're like, what is that? And that's the vibe that I got from this. So I guess I'll let you reveal what it is we're actually looking at.
Yeah, it was a family of giraffes in Namibia a few years ago. Obviously, I think now if you're looking at the image, it shot with a drone. But I think you and I had talked previously, like I love to, through the work that I do, be able to give people a perspective and a look at something in a creative way that isn't at eye level, just the way we live life all the time. And so, the past however many years, 10, 12 years, the drone thing has given me the opportunity to see the world in a unique way and then be able to truly like present that back in an artistic way to the people that, look at my stuff. That family of giraffes, Namibia was going through a severe drought that year. So it worked out really well that the ground was just burned to a crisp, just with that brown red color on the veld. And then trying to wait for the giraffes to walk, 90 degrees perpendicular to the sun so that the shadows were exactly right. But was able to capture it. And then, you make a big print of it and put it on the wall. It's a little easier to look at. But if you look at a small Instagram thumbnail, sometimes you're like, well, it's hard to tell. But it was a unique one, and it was a great trip that I did a few years ago on an assignment in Namibia.
Well, and they're spaced out so evenly too, and so like from my perspective, the first time I saw it very small, I thought it was almost like a claw on a wall, and I'm like, okay, what's the story behind here? And
the Monster logo, the Monster Drinks logo.
That's
Somebody
right.
told me that once.
Yeah, wow, fantastic image.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Another thought that I had whenever I was looking at it was, we serve a God who's everywhere, and you've been talking about that essentially with these trips to Africa and working with these kids. But I kind of envisioned like this drone shot, like it's God looking down on His creation as they traverse this landscape that He's created, but it's not easy sometimes for His creation to make it through. And
Yeah.
I guess we experience that sometimes too, that, we serve a God and we're in the world, but we're not of the world, hopefully. But he gives us a way. He provides the sustenance that we need and the path that we need to get through whatever trials come our way.
For sure. It's a great metaphorical look at that. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that I love about it is that it was a family. It was not that I'm a giraffe biologist by any means, but it was clearly, one male and a female that was a little smaller, and then two smaller ones, which was, in what you're saying about, creation and God providing a way in this there are a lot of parallels there, which I think is really cool. And, all the way back to the beginning of like you talking about adventures. And it's like, I just really think God has given us, my favorite verse is John 10:10, like, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly, have it to the full. And, I've always kind of just tried to live that way and observe things that way. Like, we've got this life, man. Like, let's do it, and, it is linear though. It's like we've got a certain amount of time to go from A to B, and that's the end of it. So,
right. Yeah. I spent a lot of time with that verse recently, and you're totally right that sometimes we get stuck in just a path of mundane, minutia, but that's not God's intention for us at all. It's all about, the abundant life that he provides for you. But you've got to be willing to tap into that sometimes, because we do get in a rut.
I think so. I think, and then we can sit around and feel bad for ourselves or feel like, but just try to every day, like, find those things that bring you joy and celebrate them and recognize them and be thankful for them. And, I've lived a life just full of blessings, and sometimes we kind of work ourselves into the grind of not recognizing those things. And I think that's when you get kind of down. But I'd like to think that I try to overcome that and get head back above the water and see those things that God has put in front of us every day.
And then you see a picture like this little boy, and you're like, "What am I complaining about?"
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, that's the like I said, that's just such the humbling part of that experience. That you feel like you're going there, like you're going to make some difference, and you come home with this feeling of, it's just a real humbling feeling.
So we're going to completely change routes here. I guess it's completely changing a path here. You shared an image of a moose. And if anyone takes a look at your Instagram, I find like you like darks and like maybe like bluish tint, right? And I pick up on that in a lot of your images. And this moose image is probably a good example of some of that use of color and like the cooler tones.
Yeah. I mean, I just love shooting wildlife. I know, I've listened to some of your other guests that are good friends of mine, and I think they say things that echo so true for all of us that shoot wildlife is like, there's no script to it. We get to go out, like we're just saying, like, go out and experience creation and like experience all these cool things that God has made and like recognize them, and then, maybe capture them and tell a story with them. And, that moose was, that was up in Alaska, a couple of years ago. I was with John Hafner, who was a guest of yours previously. John and I have kind of shot all over the world together, but
Matt Hansen made reference to John taking a lot of shots. Is that true?
I was going to reference that in this story because
okay, but I'm sorry.
I think I took maybe 10 shots, and John was switching memory cards because a terabyte had filled up on him. He's one that's quick to tell you how many frames a second he's shooting, and I'm glad that I don't have to edit with him because he definitely has like Matt had talked about. John has a ratio where he's not going to miss the shot. I shoot video a lot at 24 frames a second or 60 frames a second or 120. And I'm like, that's called Tuesday for John Hafner, shooting 120 frames a second. So, but that moose,
I hope I didn't destroy the story then.
I laughed when you were talking to Matt about it. I was on a plane and listening, and I think the person next to me kind of looked over because I just started laughing out loud, which was so classic. Yeah, the kind of like the giraffe picture. I shared that moose picture because I think with wildlife, I just want to show things in a unique way. Like we've all seen pictures of moose, and if you're lucky, you've seen them in real life, and they walk by and they're goofy looking and everything else. But I want to find a unique place to show these critters that we look at. I've got a whole series of photos of these animals that I know are looking at me, and I love that. And if at all possible, to have the camera below the eye level of that critter that's looking at you, there you get this. It creates an energy and just this. Something about it, knowing that you're looking up and they're looking at you, and there's definitely just something awesome about that. And this moose had come to the edge of this little stream, and I was right on the other side of the stream, and I crouched down. I was just kind of crouched down by an alder, my boots maybe right on the edge of the stream, and was waiting for him to turn and look at me, and he did. And of course he had he was drinking, so he had the moose drool coming out, which it was just awesome. It was so cool to see it. It was what happened after that became a little harrowing. Moose can be pretty ornery critters. And so that moose just like sauntered across the stream, and the stream was probably 30 feet wide, and it was not real deep where we were, but he kind of sauntered across and ended up, I was crouched down, and he started eating on the alder that I was crouched below. So I went from this great sequence of photos to, okay, I've got, a 7.5 foot tall, 60-inch moose standing literally like over the top of me. He's just browsing. I mean, no immediate threat, except that I kept thinking, if I startle him, this could be a real issue. And so, I was not taking photos. I was sitting as still as I possibly could and listening to him literally chew the leaves off the tree, the little shrub that I was sitting below. And fortunately, John happened to be on the other side of him. John was about 30 yards away, and I don't know if John would even take credit for it, but for whatever reason, that moose turned and looked at John quickly, and I stood up and just ran across the stream to the other side, and the moose kind of, jumped up and ran it. So anyway, clearly survived. I was also, John and I were charged by a rhino together in Namibia, which was another photo I was going to share, but I'm like, I'll spare you all of the, the harrowing John Hafner stories. But again, trying to get to that place where you're just going to show something in a unique way, whether it be a grizzly bear or a moose or a rhino or a white-tailed deer or a pheasant or a turkey, like being able to show them just in those unique ways that creates just an emotional feel to things, which those are the shots that when you press the shutter and you feel like you got it, get you pretty excited.
Yeah, I agree. I love those shots. And I guess there's like two schools of thought on it. I love those shots where the animal is looking right down the barrel of my lens and you're just below eye level. And it's that personal connection that you had with that wild animal that allowed you a little bit of time in their space. Now, the other side of it, I hear people talk about they like shots where the animal's looking just off camera because then it proves that you weren't influenced them in any way. But I like it whenever I'm looking down the barrel of my lens. The other way's great too.
That's a really good point. I mean, going both ways on that, because so much of what we do, we are, hunters of sorts with a camera, trying to be quiet and to avoid being, smelled or seen or heard. So I totally get both sides. The ideal, I guess, is if you can shoot them both in one sequence and then get out of there, right?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So there was something I wanted to ask you about. I saw some images of hockey at Shattuck St. Mary's. And I'm a hockey guy, love hockey. Being from Pittsburgh, Shattuck St. Mary's was like, whoa, because Sid went to school
Yeah,
there, along with
for
some
sure.
other guys too. I know Jack Johnson went there, and
Nathan
somebody
McKinnon.
Nathan
Yeah.
McKinnon was there. Yeah, yeah. So
Yep.
that's a pretty cool client to have. Do you do a lot of sports at Shattuck St. Mary's?
I worked full time at Shattuck in their marketing department for a year, kind of in my transition out of teaching. And
You didn't teach there, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I did not. I just worked kind of marketing and communications. And then they've been just great about kind of letting me evolve into where I'm at now. So they're a client that I would say is just one that I've had, this great relationship with for going on 6 years now. Shooting some sports, some stuff on campus, telling stories. It's an amazing place with really special people. The hockey part of things has been a really awesome part of my journey there. I'm in the middle of a documentary that is out of the ESPN 30 for 30 model, maybe, where we're working on it. My partner there is a guy named Rich McHugh, who is an executive producer for Good Morning America, NBC, is a hockey alum. So he and I have kind of worked on this together over the last 5 years, and we're in the cutting stage now, putting that whole thing together, kind of telling the story, this resurrection of the most amazing prep high school hockey program in the world, and being able to kind of tell that story. So that's been a really fun project to work on, and to work with Rich, who's multi-Emmy award winning guy, has been a pretty cool experience as well.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. So another school that I saw that you had posted about on Instagram recently was a school for the deaf. And watching your stories, it seemed like that really impacted you. Tell us a little bit about that project.
It was one of the kind of Shattuck assignments that I just was given. The Minnesota School for the Deaf is just down the road from Shattuck. And so we had, Shattuck has a couple of their prep hockey girls who are amazingly accomplished in their own unique ways, that are involved with students at the School for the Deaf, and kind of pursuing American Sign Language as probably a major as they go on to play Division I hockey. They're going to do that anyway. We were doing a magazine article about those students, those hockey players, and working there. And so I got to go down and just kind of follow them around and hang out at the School for the Deaf, shoot some photos and just observe and take it all in. And it was just like super humbling, but at the same time, there was this element where it sort of felt like you were in a foreign country, because you couldn't communicate like we would, right now. But at the same time, I remember walking out of there and I'm like, there are certain things that transcend your ability to verbally communicate, and just smiles and laughs and things like that, really, really go a long ways. And I was just, in a real humbling kind of way, reminded of that day, that I can blab my mouth off with the best of them, but there was a day where I didn't get to say much, but there was a lot said to me and back and forth without ever having to say any words, which was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. So what I teach high school video production, and we have a annual student video festival that we'll go to. We submit different things, and there's actually a Pittsburgh School for the Deaf that submits video to this competition, and it's always really neat. Like, they do a newscast, and like they do sign language in their newscast, and they can, audio obviously is super important, but I always enjoy seeing how these kids who can't hear still tell stories, just with the visuals that are on screen, and it's a pretty powerful thing.
That's
And
very cool.
they're probably more in tune with the visual than what I am, because that's their ability.
Yeah, I've often thought that. I remember even as a kid thinking that, like, if you were blind, how much more acute is your sense of smell or your sense of hearing? I really think that if God has put you in a place where one of those things was taken away, I got to believe that you have a superpower in the other ones that, the rest of us that have all of them don't get to experience, which, is probably a pretty cool thing.
Have you seen the car commercial that's out right now, where it's a father and son, and they're in a national park? I don't remember where they're at, but they go to a waterfall, and the kid signs to his dad, "Can you feel that?" So that's kind of like what you're talking about. Like he could feel the pounding of the water. So yeah, that's a really neat thing.
I haven't seen that commercial, but that's a great analogy with that. Exactly.
I wish I could remember what model car that was, but I can't remember. I'm
It was
not a car
probably
guy.
the one that guy was driving on the interstate the other day when you saw.
Well, my guess is he could feel every bit of the road in that car, every bump, every pebble. Poor guy. So we'll have to take up a collection and get him a new truck, but I'm not sure he could afford the gas. Man. Well, Matt, I've really appreciated our time together here. And one other thing I wanted to ask you about, I know you guys have kind of a homestead going, you have a farm, and I saw that one of the things about it is maple syrup that you guys do. Did you just come through your maple syrup season? Is that just completed?
I guess I've gone from a few years ago. We did big production, like we tapped about 700 trees and ran lines and gravity vacuum and reverse osmosis and all kinds of stuff, which was awesome. And actually, tying back to the Simba thing, we took all of that syrup and let Simba sell it as kind of a fundraiser for them. So that was a few years back, but it was 6 weeks of a full-time job. I mean, it was crazy. So I've kind of just dabbled the last couple of years. My wife has a cane sugar sensitivity, so she likes to bake with maple syrup. So I made just enough to like get my clothes smoky and, walk up and down the hills a little bit this year. But it's an amazing process. It's really cool. It's been cool to, our kids have been involved with, and hopefully a good memory for them. And it's just something that, when you get to the end of a typical winter, which we didn't have this year, being cooped up, it's nice to get out and start hiking around in the woods and stuff like that. So maple syruping has been a really fun kind of hobby, or jobby as it was called for a while.
Yeah, sounds like it. So do your kids help out on the farm quite a bit? Maybe not as much as you'd like.
No, they do.
Okay.
My oldest son has chickens and has a kind of a chicken operation, and they all show animals, with 4-H and FFA, and so they're great about their chickens and ducks and pigs, and they're really great about doing their chores and taking care of those things. My wife grew up on a dairy farm down the road a little ways, so we just felt like those things, those lessons, and learning that way of life is important stuff, and so. Not every day do our kids buy into it the way we'd hope, but most days they're pretty darn good about carrying the load and doing what they need to. And it's been a great lifestyle. We're blessed to live in the place we do.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. So I greatly appreciate you taking the time. And as we talked before we even got started, there are so many aspects to Matt Addington that we could continue to explore. Maybe we'll have to do it again sometime. Hopefully, maybe one of these days I'll meet up with you and John and Matt, and I'm sure there's like 4 other Matts that could join us.
No, that would be awesome. Like I said, I was a big fan of your work and the kind of the podcast stuff. I stumbled on not long ago, but your work obviously, and like we talked about, there's this really cool fraternity of photographers that social media has given us the ability to get to know each other, and I'm grateful that we've crossed paths and gotten to know each other, and the opportunity to just get on and chat with you has been really fun.
Well, yeah, likewise, and my best to your family as you guys continue with this ministry, and your kids are at that point where life is just super busy, and we're pulled in so many directions, and it's a fun but exhausting time. So we're both kind of in the middle of it right now. So
someday we'll retire together. We can go on like a little photo journey and just be relaxed and not have the pressure of schedules and all that stuff.
That's right. I can't wait for those days, but I don't want to wish life away either. I catch myself doing that all the time.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Matthew.
Join our community on Facebook. We have a Wild Shutter Podcast group where you can share your images and get feedback from others in the group. It's a lot of fun to see the images that everyone is posting. You can also sign up for the Wild Shutter Podcast newsletter, which highlights wildlife photographers, features information and tips on photography and wildlife species. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below if you enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.